Welcome to the online class. Today we will see the explanation of lesson number 5, The Snake and the Mirror, written by Wycombe Muhammad Bashir. Let me tell something about this writer, this author. Wycombe Muhammad Bashir was a Malayalam fiction writer. He belonged to the state of Kerala. He was a humanist, freedom fighter, novelist, and story writer. He is known for his path-breaking, disalarmingly down-to-earth style of writing that made him equally popular among literary critics as well as the common men. He is regarded as one of the most successful and outstanding writers of India. Moreover, the translation of his works into other languages has won him worldwide acclaim. He was awarded the Padma Shri in 1982. Bashir is fondly known as the Sultan, though his work have been translated into English and the 18 other Indian languages. His work has been translated into 18 languages. The speciality of his work is the language. He uses his style of writing so that readers could feel the commonness and readers could understand his writings very simply or in a very simple manner. So this lesson is taken from one of his literary work. Let us see the theme of this lesson. This story reflects on the pride, foolishness, and stupidity found in human beings. As human beings, we should not try to overestimate ourselves. Rather, we should try to establish a proper balance with the reality of life. We should always live in reality. This is the important theme of this lesson, that we should always live in reality. We live in our imagination. We live in a self-created world of assumptions, illusions, and dreams. It is far from reality. So the theme of this lesson is that one should live always in the reality. Indeed, we have the ability to change our fate, but it depends on our hard work, dedication, truthfulness. In other words, it can be said that our dreams have no legs to walk. It has only wings to fly. Let's have the explanation. The story is narrated by a homeopathic doctor who is practicing his profession. And this doctor, he is narrating one of his life experience. This doctor was unmarried, but was an admirer of beauty. He was not a rich person, but was living a poor life. This homeopathic doctor, he narrates the terrible experience of his life when he was faced by a snake. A terrible experience when he met a snake and he almost lost his life, but however he was saved. Now the story starts. It was a hot summer night, about 10 o'clock. This homeopathic doctor had his meal, had his food or dinner from the restaurant and returned to his room. Now he lived in a very small room. This house or this room was not electrified. It was a small rented room, and through his or by his meager income he was able to manage this house. He had very less clothes like shirts and dhotis, and moreover a black coat. So this homeopathic doctor, after taking his dinner from a restaurant, he comes back to his rented room. He opened the door. The sound was a familiar one. One could say that the rats and the author or the doctor shared the same room. So when he opened the door, he heard some sound, some noises, and these noises were the noises of rats. That means the house was shared by the doctor as well as rats. There were plenty of rats in his room. He took out his box of matches and lighted the kerosene lamp on the table. So since it was not electrified, there was no facility of electricity in this room, so he lighted a kerosene lamp. And then he took off his coat and hung it on the wall. Then he opened the window. It was summer season. It was hot inside. So he opened the windows as to get some fresh air. And then he comes back and take a seat on the table. It was an outer room with one wall facing the open yard. It had a tiled roof with long supporting gables that rested on the beam over the wall. There was no ceiling. There was a regular traffic of rats to and from the beam. Now this is the condition of his room, that it was full of rats. Traffic of rats, that means always there were rats in the room. And this doctor, he wanted to sleep but could not sleep because or due to summer season. Might be he feeling hot inside the room. So he moved out of the room to the veranda for a little air, but the wind god seemed to have taken time off. That means when he moved out of the room in order to get a little air, he was feeling hot inside. But what happens when he goes to the veranda? He finds that there is no wind outside, there is no air outside. So after a little while, he comes back to the room and sat down on the chair. After a while, what to do when he is trying to sleep but he couldn't sleep? So he came back to the room and he take a seat on the chair, and there was a table in front of him. He opened a box and took a book that titled Materia medica. He opened that book in front of that kerosene lamp. Now see here, he placed the book on a table, and on that table there was a large mirror that was kept, and a small comb lay beside the mirror. When he opened the book, sitting on the chair, he looked at the mirror that was placed in front of him on the table. He looked on that mirror. Now this time when he looked on the mirror, he took two decisions. He took two decisions, earth-shaking decisions. That means very incredible decisions. He looked on the mirror and he was tempted by his appearance. In those days, he was a great admirer of beauty and believed in making himself look more handsome. Since he was unmarried, so he was an admirer of beauty. So when he looked on the mirror, he took the comb and tried to adjust his hairs. And then again he heard the sound, the rattling sound of the snakes, the noises of snakes, the whispering sound of snakes coming from above. But he did not take notice of that noise. He continued to behold the mirror. Then he took a closer look at his face in the mirror, and then he took two decisions. First, he would shave daily and grow a thin mustache to look more handsome. First decision is that he is taking, he will grow a thin mustache and clean shave daily. That means to look more handsome, he should shave daily and grow a thin mustache. Okay. Then again he looked at the mirror and smiled. It was an attractive smile. And then he took another earth-shaking decision that he would always keep the attractive smile on his face. Why? To look more handsome. He was a bachelor. He was unmarried. So he is taking a decision that he will always keep an attractive smile on his face in order to look handsome. Then he got up, paced up and down the room. Then another lovely thought struck him. He took two decisions. After that, he got up, paced up and down the room. Then another lovely thought struck him that he would marry a woman doctor who had plenty of money and a good medical practice. Then he thought that he will marry a doctor, a girl who is from a wealthy family background. Moreover, he wanted that this girl to be very fat for a valid reason. If he made some silly mistake and need to run away, she should not be able to run after him and catch him. Why he wanted to marry a fat girl? Because if he did any mistake and run away, this girl would not be able to run behind him and catch him. While he was thinking all these things, sitting on the chair, again he heard the noise of rats coming from above the beam. Suddenly, there came a dull thud as if a rubber tube had fallen to the ground. Suddenly or immediately, something fell on him, and it was just like a rubber tube. He could not get it. At first, it seemed that it is just like a rubber tube. And sooner, he turned and looked at that thing that seemed like rubber tube. He was startled. He was terrified to know and see that it was a fat snake that fell on his shoulder. This snake's landing on him and his turning were simultaneously. Now see, he's sitting there in front of a mirror. He's guessing about his life. He's thinking about his life. He's thinking how to look handsome, more handsome. Meanwhile, suddenly something fell on his shoulder. When this thing fell on his shoulder, he turned. His turning and the landing of snake on his shoulder was simultaneously, instantly. And it was in that condition he realized that it was not a rubber tube. It was a big, fat snake that fell on his shoulder. He could not jump. He could not react. He could not cry out. There was no time to do any such thing. That means the snake that fell on him, that he was not able to jump, he was not able to cry, shout for help. He became just like lifeless object, motionless object. The snake slithered along his shoulder and coiled around his left arm above the elbow. The hood was spread out and its head was hardly 3 or 4 inches from his face. Now see here, the snake that fell on his shoulder, it moved from his shoulder to the arm above the elbow, and it coiled there, and the hood of that snake stood 3 or 4 inches from his face. What a terrible situation it is. The doctor sat there holding his breath. He was turned to stone. That means he just became like stone, lifeless, motionless object. The door opened into darkness. The door was surrounded by darkness. In the light of the lamp, he sat there like a stone image in the flesh. Now the door was opened. It was all dark except the area which was lighted by the kerosene lamp. And he stood there. He sat there, motionless like a stone. He felt the great presence of the Creator of this world and this universe. God was there. He felt that the great presence of this Creator, the great presence of this universe Creator was in this room. He was in pain. His left arm gave him pain. It was as if a thick a rod made of molten fire was slowly but powerfully crushing his arm. You know that the snake, when it coils something, it tightens. It moves in such a way that it tried to crush that object by coiling around. So that same thing happened to the doctor. The snake coiled and it began to tighten its hold on his arm. The arm was beginning to be drained of all strength. And in that situation, what could he do? He failed to understand. Situation. At that moment, his slightest movement would provoke the snake to bite him, and he would be died on the spot. This poor doctor, he felt that he is very weak, he is stupid, he is foolish. And then the snake turned its head. It looked into the mirror and saw its reflection. Now see here, some change is brought in the snake. How? When you see here, the snake coiled the arm and he's sitting in front of a mirror, in front of a table, and the snake moved its head and looked at the mirror, and then he saw its reflection. But this time the doctor is sitting motionless, without any movement in his body. Even he held his breath. He is just like a stone image. And then it was certain that the snake was looking into the mirror. Was it admiring its own beauty? Was it trying to make an important decision about growing a mustache or using eyeshadow or any cosmetic to be looked more handsome, beautiful or pretty? Now this time when the snake was looking at the mirror, this homeopathic doctor, he's thinking whether this snake is admiring its own beauty, whether this snake is trying to make any decision like him. He didn't know for certain what the snake was looking at, but it was sure that the snake was looking at its image. Now while the snake was looking at the mirror, the snake made a move from the arm. It crept onto the table and moved towards the mirror. Now there is a change. Okay? The snake, when it looked at the reflection of mirror, he might have seen an image of snake, and thus this snake crept onto the table and moved towards the mirror. Perhaps it wanted to enjoy its reflection at closer quarters. It seemed that the snake wanted to have a closer look at the mirror. And immediately, as the snake left the doctor, he stood up and ran for his life. He quietly went out of the room into the veranda. From there, he leapt into the yard and ran for his life. This is how this doctor is saved. As the snake left him, moved on to the table to get a closer view, to get a closer look at the mirror, and his reflection. Immediately this doctor fled for his life. He stood up from there. He ran for his life. He ran to one of his friends and ran till he reached a friend's house. He ran and ran till he reached a friend's house. Immediately he smeared oil all over himself and took a bath. Then he changed his clothes. This is what he did when he reached the house of his friend. He smeared oil upon his body and then had a fresh bath, then changed his clothes. The next morning at about 8:30, he took his friend and went to the room. But this time there was no snake. This time he found that some thief had removed most of his things. The room had been cleaned out, but the thief had left behind one thing as a final insult. Now what's that? It was his vest, the dirty one. The fellow had such a sense of cleanliness that he did not take them. Now this is how the doctor was saved. The doctor laughed and said that I have never seen it since. It was a snake which was taken by its own beauty. Now see here, human, they are attracted towards their own beauty, their own appearance. But here is a snake that is tempted and taken by its own beauty, by the reflection on the mirror. This snake was attracted, and this made the snake to move from the arm of the doctor, and thus the doctor was saved from the snake.